Great, thank you. Hopefully you can all see me, and thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. So yeah, my name's Anushka Lads. I am a VP Market Development across Europe, and very much an advocate for female talent and development also in MasterCard. And I think it's probably fair to say within MasterCard, we certainly put career and gender balance certainly very much at the heart of our realm, and certainly at the heart of our DNA. And what I want to do today is just walk you through one of the programs that we're conducting at MasterCard. There are a range where we're supporting talent and development, but specifically I want to talk to you about a program which we entitle Relaunch Your Career, which is really a program focusing on supporting people that have been out of an organization, or certainly out of a work environment, for a period of time and are wanting to re-enter the workplace, but are either unclear or nervous about doing so, and the program that we set up to be able to do that. To provide a bit of context, though, I am a mum with 2 young children, and myself shifted gear, or certainly shifted in terms of priorities, when after having children and before that. So on to my next slide. Certainly before I had children, I thought that this was how I would be as a mum, and I'm sure you can relate to fathers as well. Somebody that was balancing everything, that could successfully be raising 2 children and successfully supporting a career. I quite quickly realised that the reality was, on to the next slide, please, was this. I felt certainly that trying to balance everything, trying to have a successful career, trying to raise 2 very small children, be a successful wife, friend, daughter, and so forth, it certainly felt like I was spinning many plates, and really posed the question to myself, to my peers, to MasterCard, that why wasn't it possible to balance all of this? So on to my next slide, please. Why wasn't it possible to balance and actually look at a way in which you could certainly support a successful home life and a successful work life? And I think one of the things, certainly from my perspective, that has attracted me to stay with MasterCard for nearly 2 years in many different markets that I've operated, is the support that they have provided to gender equality, to certainly the flexibility that is provided, but also looking at talent for me in a very different way. So how have we done this? On to my next slide, please. So Relaunch Your Career certainly looks at under 3 kind of key buckets, and ultimately MasterCard aspires to become an organisation where people feel motivated, inspired to build their careers, to thrive within careers, and certainly feel that they are supported throughout their total life journey, whether that's coming out of a graduate program all the way through into entering new parenthood and beyond. And we bucket this under kind of 3 key pillars, as you can see on the left-hand side. The first is looking at women in early careers and making sure that we are successfully supporting women, either if they're on graduate schemes, or even looking at providing placements through graduate training and so forth, and also looking at supporting women as they're coming off their first role. We see that there's certainly a need and a desire for women to really be able to think about their career very early in their life stage. And we have certainly seen in MasterCard that coming off a graduate scheme, coming into your first kind of proper job, that women certainly need guidance and support in those career decisions. On the left-hand side, women in technology, it's not a new phenomenon that we all know that there is certainly a gap in women in STEM, and certainly we're focusing on the youth component of that through Girls for Tech and so forth. But we're very much supporting women and MasterCard positions itself very much as a technology company, supporting our female talent and development throughout the technology lifestyle, whether that's through looking at getting into coding, whether that's looking at getting into business development, supporting our women in terms of their knowledge and education. And then with women in leadership, we have very clear leadership programs which look to support our female talent and development through training, through mentorship, through sponsorship, supporting identifying our high talent women, and certainly supporting their progress throughout their career life span at Mastercard. And ultimately, our objectives fall under 4 key headings. The first is we want to build a diverse workforce and pipeline of talent. It's critical that we have diversity, because ultimately diversity brings new thinking and new different ways of working, and making sure we're continuing that pipeline of talent. So as I talked about women in early careers, we really need to make sure that we're feeding those women coming into careers at the more junior levels to really ensure that we're building the foundations for the future. We want to continue to be positioned as certainly a great place to work. We believe through surveys and so forth that we conduct, it is absolutely critical that we make sure that our employees feel that it is ultimately an inspiring and motivational organisation to work within. We want to, of course, increase the percentage of female talent hired into the organisations, particularly at mid-career levels. And what we really find, and certainly with, and I'll come on to talk more about the Relaunch Your Career specific objectives, we have found that the mid-career levels is where we certainly see key decisions being made in terms of, and I talked about earlier regarding the challenges that women face, whether that is new parenthood, whether that is caring for elderly parents. We do see some stark kind of changes at mid-career levels. So really looking at increasing the pipeline at that mid-career level, because ultimately if we do that, we are hoping that that will springboard into certainly more executive levels moving forward. And we also look at identifying high potential and emerging female talent, developing their skills, looking at making sure they're taking on broad roles, challenging their norm, giving them different views, thoughts on roles which they can undertake within the organisation, mentoring, sponsoring them to make sure that we're not only looking at the location they're operating in, but also the global potential that is provided with a company such as Mastercard. But the Relaunch Your Career, even though it kind of touches on all of those 4 components, it was really the third component where we had the aha moment, where we were saying, okay, we recognize the need to really start to increase the level of female talent in the organisation at this mid-career level. Like I said, there are some key decisions which are made in women's career around the mid-career level component, and we identified that we needed to be able to nurture women at that level. And one of the components that we'd really identified within this was women that had exited a corporate career for whatever reason, whether it's parenthood, whether it is caring for elderly parents, whether it's health. And but there was a real desire. We had identified through research that we conducted that there was a pool of women very keen to come back into the organisation or into a corporate organisation, but were really unclear and may I say, not very confident about a way to do that. So on to the next slide, please. So how we have done that is we launched a program 2 years ago under the guise of Relaunch Your Career. And like I said, focusing very much on experienced mid-career level talent. And we are typically focusing those people, and this is open to men and women, who have had a career break of more than 2 years and are very interested in returning back to work permanently. We found we didn't want to limit this to women because ultimately there was a pool of men who also had taken on a similar guise or a similar exit from their career for the same reasons. We did want to ensure that we were bringing people back who had operated at a similar level within kind of technology, financial services, professional services, IT, and so forth. Really because we found that ultimately the skills, the foundational skills were there. They may have taken a career from anything from 2 to 8 years, for example, but the foundational skills and the knowledge of operating within a corporate environment was still there, but ultimately, and the ambition was also there. So the program component is run under a structure of 12 weeks, running across multiple markets. And we have piloted this in the UK and Ireland division. So we started in London and in Ireland. The 12-week program, we started with four women 2 years ago who we had identified as people we thought could be good prospects for to hire. And within that, the women undertook a number of roles within business development, within IT, within our labs function. And as a result of that 12-week program, they had clear learning and development support. So they had buddies throughout the program, which ultimately would support them navigating the business. We know that, corporate environments are always a little complex when you're joining an organization for the first time. So certainly buddying them up with an individual was something which they really appreciated. And there was also the potential to offer a permanent role at the end of the program, and obviously that was subject to vacancy availability and budget. And as you can see there, as a result of our first wave, we had a 60% conversion rate to permanent hires. As a result, actually, there was 3 out of the 4 ladies that were on the program converted to a full-time role, and the 4th lady went on to find another role within another banking institution. So all of the 4 women who came through the program ended up coming back into the corporate environment. And on to my next slide, please. So what I really liked about the Relaunch Your Career program, and I'm an advocate, I've been through it. We're on to the 2nd year, and I've been a manager of 2 of the ladies who've come through the program, was the breadth of support that was provided throughout the overall program. So you can see here, if we start on the left-hand side, managers were actually educated around the support that they needed to be provided to individuals, the needs to ensure that they had meaningful work projects during their time with MasterCard. It was absolutely critical that we didn't see these people as just a 12-week individual who could come and do admin. We needed to make sure that they had very clear projects, that the projects were identified. We had to pitch for that resource. So we had to provide a rationale to HR and talent around why we wanted those individuals, what the projects they would be doing, and what would be the output that they would be completing. Also, what I really liked about the management training was some of the softer elements, which maybe we don't consider if you haven't had a large kind of career break. For example, some of the more emotional processes that these return to work placements were going through. For the first kind of couple of weeks, the euphoria of coming back to work, of actually being in a corporate environment again after many years. And then quite quickly, as this becomes the norm, the reality of these individuals of actually having the grapples with, can I balance? Is this the right thing? So certainly having the emotional kind of recognition of what these employees may go through, for me, was also extremely useful, and being able to spot some of those trends and quite quickly call them out and support these individuals if that is something that they are feeling. Down to the actual individual, they have a 2-day induction program which covers internal sessions, so business overview, product knowledge essentials, HR intro, and so forth. And this is really a way to give the individuals an insight into our organisation quite quickly, get them up to speed with how our business operates, give them some good product insight and knowledge, get them to meet others on the programme, and also form a little kind of coalition within them. And then we had some external sessions covering preparing for personal change, building strengths and confidence. So leveraging the agency which ultimately oversaw this to really help nurture some of those softer skills which may have been forgotten or may have been needed to be renewed. So you can see the topics there certainly that these individuals went through. One of the other key components that we find with any new starter is the complexity in an organisation such as Mastercard in terms of how we make money. We would have a 1 to 2 hour session, which ultimately was run by our finance team, and it took place 2 weeks after the start date. We thought it would be too much to give these individuals all of this information up front. We wanted to ultimately get them feeling comfortable in the organization, get them feeling that they were nurtured, that they could build relationships. And once they had established that and they felt confident, giving them this information about how Mastercard ultimately makes money, we thought was really good for them, because ultimately they understood the context of the organization. As I spoke to, we had a buddy assigned to each of those individuals, and this was either an individual who had either conducted a similar process, might have been new back to Mastercard, but may have taken some time out throughout their career, or certainly somebody that has the knowledge and the experience to be able to support these individuals. And for Wave 2, what we've actually done is we've leveraged Wave 1, Relaunch Your Career individuals who are now conducted as being buddies. And we found that has certainly been really useful, because they can give first-hand experience about what it's like to go through the program. You know, they can talk about all the things that they might not feel comfortable talking to their manager about, such as, you know, I'm coming back, I'm struggling with this. How did you overcome it? How did you deal with the commute? The things that actually you don't want to, as you're joining an organization, you may not have considered when you're coming back into a workplace. Also, throughout the first kind of 6 to 8 weeks of the program, we had some lunch and learn sessions with senior leaders, really to kind of cover two things. The first was just to give them profile and give them access to these types of leaders, but also to give them some insights into how the organisation works, the considerations and thoughts and views around different components and drivers of the organisation. And then our ongoing learning support tools. So we have a number of HR tools and learning and development tools, such as our Mastercard University, such as our degree program and so forth. We absolutely encourage them to access all of these learning tools to help them find their pathway through the duration of the program. So professional skills training, presentation programs and so forth, for them to be able to access that. And I think wrapping around all of this, what we really found was understanding the individual, trying to help them navigate where their career may go in Mastercard, giving them some guidance around the various areas that they may want to consider through their own career strengths. Giving them exposure. So certainly as the manager was absolutely encouraged to set up individual one-to-ones with key people across the organizations, just a 30-minute discussion with them to really give them exposure to as many parts of the business as possible, and really to help try and find them a permanent role if that's what they should wish, and but to give them exposure to different areas of the business. We ultimately aligned their skills coming back into the organization to an area that we felt they would have the best chance of success, but absolutely as they are going throughout their kind of 12-week journey, giving them that exposure we found was really useful, because ultimately we found individuals who may have started in business development, for example. One lady started in BD and then she moved into marketing. So giving them that exposure to different areas of the business, we certainly felt was critical for them. So just to summarize, certainly from our perspective around why we've established the Relaunch Your Career program, we find that individuals are very motivated. If they're coming back in after a career break, they're making a very conscious decision to return back to corporate life. We have found that certainly these individuals are really motivated. They want to perform, they want to support the business, they want to support their own career. and we have found that all individuals that have joined after the 2-year program have certainly been successful in their careers at Mastercard. And wave 2 is looking like we're having a good conversion rate. So we're just coming to the end of the program, and in fact, all individuals, there was 5 individuals, including 1 male, who joined the program. They started on a 12-week program. All of their programs were extended to 6 months because we saw such value in the projects that they were undertaking. And all of these individuals are now going through applying for permanent positions within Mastercard. So we found that they're extremely motivated. We found that the mid-career level was an issue, and actually looking at these types of individuals is certainly helping to fill the talent pipeline. And also supporting our strong managers as well, helping them think differently about how to manage individuals, giving them some differing ways to manage emotional requirements. Certainly we have found has been very, very useful. And also the buddies that we've signed them up or aligned them to, you know, we very much see that the buddies have benefited from providing their guidance, their advice, their knowledge, and certainly helping them think about much more broader leadership skills. So I'm going to pause there. Ladies, I'm not sure if there's questions that you want to take now or at the end.
Anushka, we'll do them now, and then if we've got time at the end, we'll go back to them. So we have got a couple of questions, so thank you for that. Very clear presentation, and as I mentioned before, we'll be sharing that. A question for you here: what percentage of your relaunches were technology based? And I also was thinking that, as you mentioned that one person had moved from business development to marketing, I wondered what number of them had come with perhaps some technology training in the background, although presumably they'd had a break, so their technology skills may be a little bit redundant. And how many of them may have gone into a role at Mastercard that required technology skills ultimately?
Yeah, so no, great question. So I think ultimately we had about 50% of the individuals, and across both cohorts I'm talking about, 50% of the individuals who've had what I would call technical knowledge, and around 50% of the individuals who I would say have got industry knowledge. And industry knowledge could be anything from, so Mastercard operates not only across banks, but also across what we entitle merchants, so hotels, airlines, and so forth. So it could be industry knowledge relating to one of those areas. So one of the individuals actually came from a hotel chain because they had relevant industry experience to a merchant area which we were looking at developing. So, and technology doesn't necessarily have to be payments technology. So we've had people that have who've been project managers at IT companies, but they are, you know, in the main, their thought process aligns with our kind of technology framework. So it's really about the skills. It isn't necessarily about the complete 100% relevance, but I would say around 50% came from much more of an IT background, and 50% came from an industry relevance background. And what we found with those individuals, so one of the ladies who came, she was actually running her own, she was a consultant running a small brand agency. She came in and was leading a digital project. So she was actually leveraging her skills, her brand skills, into a digital environment. She went into a marketing role within a product function, and now she's gone into a product development function. So ultimately, the skills that we look for, it's more about the application, the fact that the skills that they may have are relevant to the business in some way. What it doesn't mean is we have to have 100% alignment, but we look for that balance in both cohorts. Those individuals that have got what I would call technology and IT backgrounds, and those that have got industry relevant backgrounds.
Thank you, Anushka. Couple more questions. So the first is, how did you go about sourcing these people to, or how do you go about sourcing the people to come on these courses?
Yeah, so a number of ways. So through the first cohort, we absolutely kind of learned a lot of it was actually through word of mouth. It was the first program that we were testing in one market, and we put it up on our social channels. We put it up, through Facebook and Twitter and so forth, and we leveraged, the typical methods through LinkedIn and so forth. But what we also did is we communicated this across the organisation, across London and Ireland, to promote the programme, to say, look, if there's anybody that you know who, as we're looking to trial this programme in one market, please let us know. And we got some really great CVs as a result of that. After the first cohort, we then did a lot of publicity around this. So you may see, and certainly I think at the end of this session, there's a video which talks to two of the individuals who've actually been on the programme and a day in the life and the success that they've seen as a result of that. So we leverage that very heavily throughout our social channels. We have also worked very closely with the mayor and the mayor's office, and because they're looking at, and I know Sky is also supporting them, but we've worked very much with the mayor around supporting their own female positioning, and certainly promoting our Relaunch Your Career programme, leveraging our media channels. Obviously, we have access not only through our consumer lens, but also through our issuer lens and through our merchant lens. So we shared that with all of our customers as well, with the banks, to talk about what we're doing. So it was very much kind of a social environment that we conducted this, and we found, we had a threefold level of CVs that we saw in the second cohort, and now we're rolling this out across other markets. So we are now rolling this out to Dubai, we're rolling this out to the US and over to Asia Pacific as well. So every time we do it, we learn. We've had such good quality of CVs through conducting that method that ultimately we found that has been really successful. I'm sure we will continue to learn for the next cohort next year.
Thank you. And a final question for now, and if anybody has got other questions, if you could post them in the questions box, we'll see if we've got time at the end. But final question is finding a role. So how much support do these people then get to find a role? You said they'll obviously be recruited if there's a suitable role and they've got the right skills, but how does that happen? Are they supported in this, or do they have to kind of do it on their own?
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, to some degree, from a manager perspective, if we can find them a good role, and certainly a role within the organisation, that's deemed as a huge success. So what we don't do is look to hire 20 people when realistically there's only 4 roles. So we have to make sure that we get good quality individuals. We have to make sure that there is roles available. We don't necessarily marry up roles from day one, because ultimately a 12-week program, kind of what recruitment looks like or what available roles look like from day one can look very different to the end of week 12. But as there's three ways in which we do this. The first is, yes, we give the individual access to our job publication board. So by joining Mastercard, obviously they get access to the intranet and they get access to all of the internal and external postings that are available. As a manager, you are absolutely encouraged, and it's one of the requirements to support them in finding and this is if we feel the individual is right and they're performing at the end of during the program. But we're absolutely encouraged to support these individuals to find roles, and that is through our own network. So understanding what jobs are coming, acting as publicity or certainly as a sponsor for these individuals, understanding their skills, their expertise, and trying to align those skills to the relevant areas. And thirdly, HR and talent act very much as custodians. So obviously they get insight to all roles that are coming up through the business, and they act very much as custodians for these individuals. So 3 ways, but both from an individual, from a management perspective, and from an HR and talent point of view, we're all aligned to help these individuals ultimately find a placement. And if there isn't one that is being publicised, actually going to talk to the areas where we feel their skills would best align, and identifying whether there are any roles coming up in the future as well. And for example, we've done that with a couple of the individuals who are on the second cohort, where actually we know there's a role coming, but it might not be for 1 or 2 months. So we've looked to say, well, look, we want to keep hold of this individual. Let's extend their placement, and then we hope that that role will come up, and ultimately that will transpire into a permanent role. So multiple ways in which we support that.
Thank you, Anushka. And as Anushka said, there is a short video on the MasterCard programme, and we'll be sharing the link with you through chat at the end of the session. So thanks, Anushka. We're now going to move on to hear from Conrad, who's the Academy Leader at Group Technology Sky, about their Get Into Tech programme. So once Catherine's got Conrad's slides up, get Conrad going.
Right. Hello. Thanks very much for the introduction there, Penny. So my name's Conrad Langworthy. I'm Head of Software Engineering Academy at Sky, which is primarily aimed at starting people out in careers in technology. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about our Get Into Tech scheme, which we launched in 2016, and obviously, you know, the reasons for doing this are well recognised. That there aren't enough women in technology, but also even less that are taking software development roles. And what we were looking to do was address the balance of the amount of females that were applying for a role on the Software Engineering Academy or one of our apprenticeship schemes. When we go out each year to recruit people, traditionally we've always looked for the majority of them to come from the technology pool or computer science pool, and that's very, very small. And when you start identifying females that want to apply, that pool gets even smaller. So the thinking was that could we offer a scheme to women that wanted to start a career in technology, but offer it to women from almost any background, and therefore start looking in perhaps pools that we hadn't previously thought about or recruited from. And as a result, what we were looking to achieve is to give women an opportunity to come and develop a career in technology, and therefore look to create a more balanced workforce in our delivery teams. The Get Into Tech course itself, and I'm going to go into the details a little bit more in a minute, is set up so that women can come and join us. They can learn the craft of software development, and they can learn skills in technology. And we look to run this in both our Osterley campus, which is in West London, and also in our Leeds campus as well. Next slide. So in terms of the Get Into Tech scheme itself, as I say, it's aimed at women that want to come and develop skills in software development. We assume that there is no knowledge, so it's absolutely fine to apply for the scheme and have not ever cut a line of code or written any software. And people can apply to us online, or they can apply through word of mouth. And the first thing that we would do is that we'd invite people interested in the course to attend a taster event. And the taster event is an opportunity for people to hear more about the course itself and more about what would be involved, but also to hear from some of our software engineers that have perhaps gone through the course quite recently and have now become fully fledged engineers. And it's an idea. It's an opportunity to hear from from our people and in terms of the road that they've taken to start the career that they have. The Taster event also is an opportunity to actually experience developing some simple software. So it's their first sort of delve into writing code. They do that with some of our software engineers, and they create their first piece of code. And essentially, that's really the start of their careers into technology. If they're interested in the course, we have a one-to-one discussion with them afterwards, and the reason for doing that is just to make sure that they understand that they are committing to a course over a period of time. They're able to get to the Sky campus, and to make sure that they understand what they're signing up for, and that there will be quite a lot of work for them to be doing over the time that they're with us. The course itself then is 15 weeks. It starts off with 1 week full immersion, so everybody will come to the Sky campus for the first week. They'll learn the fundamentals of software development, and the reason for doing that is that we want to develop some skills quite early on. And we want to ensure that that when the ladies are returning to us on a weekly basis, that they're building upon a solid foundation that they've developed in that first week with us. And when they've completed the first week of full immersion, then the course moves to a Thursday evening for roughly about 3 hours on the Sky campus. Obviously, during the modules, the cells, we're teaching software development, so we use a lot of JavaScript and PHP, a lot of HTML. We also teach how to deliver software, which is equally as important as actually writing it. And in addition to doing the modules themselves, there are also a number of homework projects that we give to the ladies to do during the week. And as the course goes on, they then get some project work to do in teams. But what we do is we arrange midweek for the ladies to have a Google Hangout or a Skype session with the instructor. So this means that if you know, anybody is particularly struggling with an aspect of the homework that we've given them, they are able to have a conversation with the instructor, get some help without having to wait for the following week, and then take out time during the session that we would normally be teaching them new things. Everything that we do on the course then is designed to get the ladies into a place where by the end of the 15 weeks they're confident enough, but also have enough skills to be able to apply for entry-level roles as software engineers. If they want to apply for the Software Engineering Academy at Sky, that's absolutely fine, and we would encourage that. But equally, you know, we do encourage the ladies that if they want to take their skills to other organisations and use them, that's all absolutely fine as well. The whole goal of the Getting to Tech scheme is to encourage, say, more women into software development, and we tend to run between 3 and 4 of these courses a year. Generally, they start around January time, and then we follow up with further courses in February. Next course, please. Next slide, please. So I mentioned before that everything we kind of do comes under the umbrella of a Software Engineering Academy, and so any woman that applies for Getting to Tech and secures a place on the course has an opportunity to apply for the Academy if they want to. The Academy has a number of tracks and a number of streams. So it has a graduate track for developers and testers and DevOps engineers as well. We run an apprentice developer track. We have opportunities for people to come and do summer placements with us and work experiences as well. And so anyone that's come through Getting to Tech can take advantage of any of these tracks if they want to apply for them. The other things that I run under the Academy is something called the Academy Master Scheme. So if you have someone that's gone through the Academy and has been in a delivery team for a period of time and really feels that they want to develop more team leadership skills or project management skills, then they can come back into the Academy and train as Scrum Masters and team leaders. And I also run the Agile University, which encourages people to come to the Academy and teach others across technology the skills that they've been learning in their teams. Next slide, please. So this gives you some idea of the transition timeline for a typical individual. So we'd start Getting to Tech with our attraction and selection. We would run our Insight Day. And then essentially the Getting to Tech course would get underway for 15 weeks. Once that course is complete, then to say any woman is able to apply for a place on the Software Engineering Academy. They're treated fairly similar to any other candidate that's applying. So a place in the Academy isn't something that you would get as a result of being on the scheme. You would go through our selection process, which would consist of an unattended coding test, an interview, and participation in our assessment day. And if you are successful and you do secure a place with us, then essentially you would go through an extended technology boot camp, which would last for 5 weeks, and then you would move into 4 months of educational projects. These would be real sky projects that people would work on. The difference is that they're being built by teams of people that are starting out in their career, whether that's graduates that have just left university, whether that's apprentices that have left school and have now started their careers. Equally, it could be made up of women that have gone through our Getting to Tech course. The other thing that I'm introducing this year is that any woman that comes through Getting to Tech and secures a place on the Academy, we will offer them the opportunity to study for a degree qualification in computer science, and they would be given time out of the working week to be able to do that, and we're in partnership with the university so that they're able to develop themselves at work, but also work towards a fully recognised qualification. Next slide, please. So in terms of Getting to Tech itself, we've had over 700 women apply for the scheme. 150 of them have taken a place on the course. In terms of those that have come through the scheme and then secured a place on the Academy itself, that's actually a little bit more than 27 now, because a number of courses are just completed. So it's actually closer to 40 women that have now gone through Getting to Tech and are either starting their Software Engineering Academy experience in July, or have been through it and are now fully fledged engineers. And then in terms of transforming our gender balance, the Academy last year was 47% female, whereas in previous years it's probably been something between 6 and 8%. So it's really had quite a significant impact on us being able to recruit and develop more women engineers into our business, and this year it's looking to be probably about the same, if not a little bit higher. Next slide. Great. Well, that's essentially, the Get Into Tech course in a nutshell. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Yes, please do post questions in the question box, please. I do have a question for you, Conrad, and it is, how did you manage to get such a good attendance at the taster events? How did you promote them?
Yeah, so as I say, in terms of the attraction campaign, as I've told a number of people, it's probably the easiest attraction campaign that I've ever run. I mean, obviously, we run a lot of women in tech events at Sky, and we actively do promote Get Into Tech as part of those technology events, and the attendance for those are normally very, very good. But I have a dedicated web presence which talks about Get Into Tech and what it involves, and what the course will look to cover. We do promote on things like social media and Work for Sky, and what have you. But again, a lot of it is word of mouth, and actually that's increasing year on year, because obviously the more women that go through the course, they then go and tell their friends how good it is or how successful they've been, or the fact they've managed now to completely change their career away from what they were doing before to software developers, and therefore it encourages their colleagues and friends to apply as well. Hello?
Yes, I've got my mute button on, sorry.
All right, no problems.
And the MasterCard initiative was obviously targeted at men and women. Why did Sky feel that this should be specifically targeted at women?
I think what it was down to is that the Get Into Tech scheme, and the reason why we targeted it at women was explicitly just because we don't have enough female software developers. We find before we launched Get Into Tech, we had no problems recruiting males into the Software Engineering Academy, or even into our delivery teams directly. But after talking to a number of the women that did apply with us, and just getting an understanding of the reasons why women don't choose technology, a lot of it was down to the fact that they've heard about it and they'd absolutely like to get into technology, but perhaps lack the direction or the guidance of how to get started. And so what Get Into Tech enables us to do is to bring a group of people into an environment where they are going to get that guidance on a week-by-week basis, and they're going to be signposted in the right direction, and more importantly, to be able to deal with any issues along the way that they might encounter on a face-to-face basis. And initially looking at the scheme, attracting men into software development, it isn't a problem that I need to solve. The problem is attracting more women.
Thanks, Conrad. That's very clear then. If anybody has got any more questions, if you could post in the questions box, we'll come back to Conrad at the end of the session if you think of anything between now and then. So thank you very much, Conrad, for sharing.
Thank you.
With us. And we'll now move on to Julie Thornton, who's HR Director at Tideway, who has quite a mature initiative that's been established at Tideway, and she's going to share some insights into that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Thornton, and I'm the HR Director for Tideway. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes explaining who Tideway is, as some of you may not have heard of us. Slide, please. Next slide. Sorry, thank you. So Tideway is, sorry, previous slide, one with the picture. Tideway is an organisation that and a company that was specifically brought together to build a super sewer under London. So we're quite unique because we are a construction project, but we're also a wastewater only company. So we're building a super sewer under London. It will be 25 kilometres long, and it basically goes from Acton to Beckton. As you can see from the little scale diagram there, we started with planning permission in 2014. We actually became an independent company in August 2015, and prior to that we were a project as part of Thames Water. The first scheme that we had was actually April 2015, so before we were a fully fledged organisation. If I take you through to 2018, and it says on there tunnelling begins, and actually if anyone saw the BBC News this morning, breakfast news, we're actually in the process of lowering our first tunnel boring machine, so it's all very exciting here. And the reason why we're doing this is basically when it rains, raw sewage goes into the Thames, and you can see that little quote there that enough sewage discharges to fill the Albert Hall 450 times over every year. So it's quite an important project, but it brings together a number of things that aren't necessarily top on people's list if they're looking for a career, which is around sewage and construction. And therefore, when we started to look at this scheme, we had a couple of drivers behind it. The first was we had a CEO who back in 2014 basically said we would reach gender parity on our project by the end of construction. And you can see on that diagram, that's around 2022-ish, 23. We are also working in an industry where women are very much underrepresented. So if you take construction, only 12% of the workforce are female, and if you look at engineers, 11% are female. What we were looking to do was not only fill the roles that we had as we were a new project and a new company starting up, but also looking at that gender gap as well. So we were looking at both skills and gender. So very important for us that we were we do a whole heap of things around things like schools and universities and apprenticeships and STEM ambassadors. But the gap that I thought we had was really around that experienced talent that was there in the market that didn't know how to get back into the market. So I'm just going to talk you through the 3 programs that we've run. And I've been asked specifically to talk about lessons we've learned. So anyone thinking of doing a program going forward, you can take hopefully some things that we've learned and put it into practice straight away. Next slide, please. So we have run 3 programs. The first was back in 2015. We had 7 returners join Tideway, and as you can see, they were across a whole range of skill sets. I think what's important to note is that also as an organisation, we are an integrated organisation with other organisations, with other companies. So at the point that we ran our first scheme, we were a very small independent company within a project, if you see what I mean, and there was only 53 permanent employees, but a whole heap of other people. We had 42 different organisations working. So we had a degree of complexity, but we had a will to make this work. The second programme, 2016, was a joint programme with our main works contractors who'd then come on board. Main works contractors took around 8 people, and we took 3 returners, and again you can see the skill areas. 2017, we had 2 returners join into internal comms and training. Our schemes are very much, I guess, aligned with the general market, where we have a 12-week program. It is a paid employment. It is open to men and women, although at present we've only had women on the scheme, and we have been supported through the last 3 programs by the external organisation that some of you probably know, Women Returners, which has been helpful in that process. As we move forward, we're looking at supported returners rather than going through a cohort program, and that's because we are in the evolution of the company and the project. We had some good successes. If you take the first program, 7 returners, 5 were made permanent, 2 had contracts that were extended, so they were on fixed contracts beyond the original 12 weeks. Of the second program, all 3 were made permanent, and of the third program, it was 50-50, so we had 1 person made permanent and 1 person had an extended contract. So we've had some good success in terms of actually people joining us, but also then going through the organisation. So we've had people who have had a number of different roles since they've joined back in 2015 and have grown their careers, or they've gone externally and they've done something externally which they would never have got if they hadn't been able to come through a returner program, making it difficult to get back into the market. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk you through now some of the details that reflect the learnings that we've had of the program over time. And I just want to start with some things that may be a bit obvious, but I think nonetheless important to think about. What is critical in all programs of this nature is that you get senior executive endorsement, and that is critical, and that wasn't a problem, and we had that buy-in. But then you've got to go through the practicalities with the managers who are actually going to be having women returners in their departments. Everyone was phenomenally enthusiastic, and the managers were actually electing. So I think that's also a good learning for us as part of this project. We started out that way, and that has been very helpful because the managers have been supportive, they wanted to make it happen, and therefore they've been very enthusiastic about the programme. But managers need to understand the practicalities, not just the concept, and that gets down to some real basics when you're actually running a programme. So when we run the programmes, we don't have detailed job descriptions or person specs. We have a paragraph that says this is roughly what the role will be, and this is roughly the background that you may have come from. And this has been very, very deliberate because we know that it's very easy for people, and particularly women, to deselect themselves if they don't tick all the boxes. And if you've been out of the marketplace for a minimum of 2 years, which was our scheme, but we did have out of the workplace for 17 years, that actually it's very easy to exclude yourself, and we didn't want that to happen. So we kept things as broad as possible. We also have to make sure that managers are understanding that they may not have immediate up-to-date experience. Now, they may have lots of experience they can draw on, and that comes back very quickly, but it may not be immediately up to date, and that's particularly important around technical skills, which may need updating. And the first month is really quite critical in terms of support, and as been mentioned on previous presenters, a good buddy really is essential because they are the person that helps the individual navigate around the organisation and ask those questions that they probably wouldn't want to ask their manager. So some of the things that we learned around managers. The returner roles, I think, was an interesting learning from our perspective, and it was a little driven by the returners themselves, but also from the state that we were in terms of our project. So the very first cohort, 7 people came in, and they were project roles, program roles. So there was no role identified at the end of that 12-week returnship. The second 2 that we have run have been recruited into vacant positions. So it has been a vacancy that the manager has had, and the individual, if they like the company and the role and we like them, we make that role permanent. And I think that was it was an interesting learning for us of programs, and obviously the MasterCard one work on the basis of programs rather than it coming into an actual identified vacancy. We did find that some of our returners found that quite a daunting process, and that they actually felt that it was very difficult. It sort of distracted from them doing what they wanted to do in some ways, because they had to halfway through start thinking about getting a job. Although they were supported, it was still sort of something that was playing on their minds. We have also changed the shape, obviously, of the company, which is now much larger than it was, and therefore it's much easier to identify those vacant positions. What we also found is that roles that can use appropriate transferable skills gives us the greatest pool of candidates, and that again was very important for us, but also an important process of getting managers to understand about transferable skills. So we have, just to give you a couple of examples, we have someone who's an ex engineers and came into a project management role and is now managing the innovation team. We've had people who've come in from production in TV and entertainment, and now she's actually in an internal comms innovation role. So we've had people who dramatically changed not only their skill set, but their background in terms of their organisations. What we have also found is that when we've had new roles, which has often been the case as we're a new company, that the return of themselves has shaped that role, and that's been a very positive experience for both of us. So one of the learnings that I'd just like to really suggest is that to consider when you're looking at those roles, is there a clear technical need, or is it something that you can use a transferable skill, and therefore what is the suitability of that role? But also in terms of attracting people, then actually sometimes the more sort of mid-level roles have been easier for us to source candidates, and if something's been particularly niche, that has been quite tricky on occasions. If I just move on to that sourcing and the attraction and the recruitment process, again, a learning for us is that it has been labour intensive, but I would also put that into a context that says if you were running a graduate programme, that can be quite labour intensive as well, and you can have potential high volumes of CVs and letters to screen. The other thing that was key is that screening has to be personal, so sometimes you have to look and find match. So as I said, our programme had to have a 2-year gap, but people get used to actually hiding that gap. So sometimes it was a telephone conversation with them to try and really understand, had they had the gap or were they in full-time employment? And sometimes people had done small amounts of work around consultancy or supporting or voluntary work, and we didn't take that as a mark against them, because obviously some people had actually used that to cover their CV gaps. As we know, the industry isn't very good at understanding gaps in CVs. We did the first programme completely independently. In fact, I ran it. The second programme, which was integrated with our main works contractors, we involved a third-party recruitment organisation so that they could actually coordinate the recruitment across the different companies. And what was clear there is that we did spend quite a bit of time in the recruitment company in how it worked, what to look for, what was needed, because it isn't the same as a straightforward recruitment, go out and find 3 programmers. So that was quite an interesting learning from our perspective. In terms of attraction, and this has already been talked a little bit about as well by the other presenters, but it is important to pick your channels and your job boards well. LinkedIn hasn't worked really for us on returner programs. We've used networks, we've used the women returners networks that they have, but also we've used very specific job boards that specialise in roles that are part-time. And that has actually been very successful for us in attracting people. If I go back to the joint programme again that we did as contract, it became actually logistically very complicated, and I know a number of companies have grouped together to do this, but it is something that you might need to think about if you want to do it as a group of organisations, that logistics actually can become more complicated than actually running the programme needs to be, and it may be that small is actually better for you rather than thinking that you'll get a bigger cohort and a bigger group of people. Again, some learning for us in terms of how we advertise. You do need to be very specific in the adverts in terms of what you're offering and programme details. So when does it start? How long will it be for? And dates around interview dates as well as start dates, because individuals who've been out of the job market for a while and mainly for caring responsibilities may still have to find solutions to help them come back in, and they need time to be able to do. So that's been quite important. Supporting managers, it is a very different selection interview style process, and we did spend some time training our managers in doing that. If you've got someone's CV that they haven't done a job recently, you know, managers' standard questions of tell me about, you know, the last whatever you've done becomes actually quite redundant. And what's been important is to actually, again, get managers to focus on those transferable skills, and those skills may have been from a time when they were working, or it may actually be something that they have done whilst they've had caring responsibilities and out of the formal job market. And it is amazing at how many people have sort of come to life in the interviews when you started to talk about things that they have been involved in during that time out. And it's really important not to discount that. So whether that's been charity work or volunteering, or things that they've done within their family, it's really been important to us, and managed to step back a little bit from that and relax about the interview process more than they probably would do if they were just recruiting someone who's in full-time employment. And then the final point on that is really having one person responsible for the whole scheme, the whole programme, so that there is one point of contact and there is one focus and mind about how it runs, and someone where actually at the end of the day they are fully accountable for making a success of that programme. The programme itself, again, some learnings for us. Our very first advert for the first role in 2015 advertised them as full-time roles, and what became clear during the discussions that we had with people who were interested and who had applied, that we needed to add some flexibility to that, and flexibility on those programs. But we do set parameters, and I think parameters are really quite important, but again, they might be company specific. So for us, it has to be a minimum of 30 hours, but we will be flexible around how that is worked, and sometimes can be worked at home. But the conversation that I had with one individual, which was that she'd like to do 3 days a week from home, we just say no to, because it's not actually possible to help and support someone come back into a work environment if, one, they're not physically in the office, and two, they aren't able to commit enough time to do that. So after the 12 weeks, we have had people who've gone down to those sort of ranges of part-time work, but we have been quite clear on the programme itself. Mentors and buddies I've mentioned before and have been mentioned, but they are really critical, and it's critical to get the right people. Buddies, I think, are actually more effective than mentors. It's my view. So the buddies, the day-to-day interactions, helping people around the office. Mentors have been more patchy, if I'm being honest, in terms of how they've worked with the individual and supported them going forward. Cohorts have been a very interesting support system for us. So the first group of 7 are actually still all in contact, even though some of them aren't working within the organisation, and they do get together, they do support each other, and they have supported the subsequent groups of people coming in, and that's been very important. One of the things that maybe needs a little thought about as well, depending on your organisation and how it operates, really is around the internal communication. What do you say? How do you pitch it? So that people know what the programme is about, and it is seen in a positive light. So those are some of the things that you may need to think about when you launch your own programmes or your extending programmes that you've got. And one thing that, again, I would just like to mention is the value of external support and specialist support, and that we did in the first 3 programmes through Women Returners, and they helped shape not only things like the job advertisement, but also they helped the returners through coaching and some training sessions get up to speed with getting work, and also helping them look at their career longer term and what they wanted to do. So those are some of the key learnings for us. Next slide, please. I'd just like to finish really with what we confirmed. So when we set out on that first programme back in 2015, we knew that returners would be a valuable asset because they have skills and experience that we needed. They just needed an opportunity, and they have been a very valuable addition to the company. What is really important is that they bring enthusiasm, skills and experience, and they're up and running in a very short period of time. And that brings me to my next point, which is they really are no more risky than any other. I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 3 years talking to people who've been thinking about putting in programs, and one of the questions that's always raised by senior management in those organisations is, well, isn't this risky? They haven't been in employment for X number of years. For those of you who run other programs, so whether that's graduates or whether it's apprentices, this is no more risky, and in fact sometimes it's actually less risky because you have someone who already has proven track record, where in other ways some people don't. I think the other point to note is that returner programs really work well if you already have a family-friendly, inclusive organisation, which is out there to support all employees, because there will be challenges at the start of the program for some people. Not everyone, but some people will find it challenging coming back in, and that could be around the logistics and the practicalities, if not sort of the emotional side of things. We are a flexible, inclusive organisation that has really helped and supported people come in, but also want to stay after their 12 weeks. And yes, it can improve diversity in the organisation, and I think it's not only diversity of gender, but also it can be diversity of age and thought processes. As people have been out of the organisation, they do think differently and they've had different experiences. So my little picture there says mind the gap, but what I'd say is don't look at the gap, look at the skills. Thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you, Julie. Yes, please continue to post any questions if you think of any. I've got a couple. So one question is, your first year where you were responsible for recruiting people onto the course yourselves,
yeah,
you obviously took 7 on, and then you've decreased the number year on year. Is there any specific reason for that? Is that kind of part of the learning process, or is that just the way it's turned out?
It's the way it's turned out because of the organisation's evolution. So we weren't a separate company back in 2015. We were still a project, and we had lots of project type roles that we needed to get us into a position where we could be sold and be a company, which happened in August 2015. Over that period of time, obviously, we've increased in numbers, and the overall, we've now reached, if you like, the size of the organisation that we're going to be. For we've been looking more specifically around vacancies rather than it coming as a programme. So it's very much around the organisation and the shape and requirements. It's not about the returners programme not being successful, far from it. So going forward, we will be doing a more flexible approach, which actually will help us keep bringing returners into the organisation, but it will be on a one-by-one supported approach, and we're actually in the process of actually trying to recruit roles at the moment.
Thank you. And another question, I don't know whether you're able to do this, but are you able to share the job boards that have had positive impact on your attraction?
Yes, if you're happy for me to do that. I don't mind promoting them if that.
Yeah. If they've worked for you, then others will be interested.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So TimeWise have been very good. They've we've had a lot of positive responses through TimeWise. We've also used Capability Jane, and they've been quite good. TimeWise has probably been the best one for us, and they seem to have quite a broad reach. We did try Mumsnet, but I'll be perfectly honest, we didn't get much response back from Mumsnet. But we regularly actually recruit through TimeWise, and it is actually proving quite successful for us.
Thank you for that. I have no other questions at the moment, so final minute for anybody with any questions for any of our presenters today, if you'd like to post them now. As I mentioned before, we will be we have recorded this session, and it will be available in the members area of the WISE website. As Anushka mentioned in her presentation, there is this YouTube video, and I've posted the link to that in chat, so we'll leave the session open for a few minutes for you to pick that up. And if there are no more questions, then I'd just like to thank Anushka, Conrad and Julie for their contribution today and for joining us, and for all of you for attending. And if you do have any further questions, you can always reach out to WISE and we'll pass those on to the relevant presenter. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye for now.